Hello everybody. Hey, how are you doing? It's CALC here on another Novation live session, and here we are again at my little studio, the place where I sit and work and make a bit of music. And this particular session is going to be covering the Launchpad Pro Mark III. Now let's just I was just having a little jam there as we were coming through, so let's just I'm just going to mute off some parts here, and yeah, just bring a nice volume fade down there as well. So hello everybody, it's Chris here, CALC, and this is another Novation live stream from down in Brighton in the UK. Welcome, and thanks for joining me on this Friday evening. This session is going to be very much focusing on the Launchpad Pro Mark III. This is the latest in the Launchpad range. It's the flagship Launchpad system, of course, and in this situation, one thing that I find really fascinating is using this as a custom mapping device. You can really get to grips with a lot of gear using the Launchpad Pro Mark III, and this alongside the really nice standalone sequencer that's in there as well offers a really strong kind of a tool really for you to basically take control over your studio and your gear setups. It's a lot of fun to use. So we're gonna explore a little bit about kind of how I'm using it, I guess, and some of the things that I'm doing with it. In particular, I'm going to concentrate very much on the connection between the Launchpad Pro here and also this device, the Elektron Octatrack. Now, I've been a big fan of this thing for a long time now. I don't know how long it is since I've had one, but you know, it's quite a few years ago now. You can tell this is a Mark I. Everything that I do here is going to work with the Mark II as well, because having been through the manuals, I'm pretty certain that most of the controller changes, the messages that you use to control the Octatrack are similar, so you know, or the same, I should say. But yeah, we're going to go through kind of some of the mappings that I've created. We'll take you through those, the connections as well, how it's all interconnected. Equally, I want to share with you a really neat trick as well. Now, this is, if you're an Elektron Octatrack fan, you'll probably come across this this trick before. It's called the transition trick. And that is a way of being able to move in between banks and patterns on the Octatrack in a really smooth, kind of nice, kind of considered transition way. And that's one of the things I'm going to explore. Now, you can, of course, do that directly on the Octatrack, and the key thing with that is using the crossfader to do it, and a lot of people enjoy doing that. But actually, with the Launchpad Pro and these custom mappings that we've got, I think it takes a lot of the stress out of the setup for doing that, and there's some really neat tricks that you can use for that. So let's just explore a bit about the Launchpad Pro. Just very briefly, we'll talk about how it's connected and the internal sequencer on here as well. And then we'll dive into how it's connected into the Octatrack and actually the rest of the studio as well, because the Launchpad Pro here is actually controlling for this demonstration. We've got it controlling the Octatrack, of course. It's also going to be sequencing the Summit here, the Novation Summit, fantastic synthesizer. I'm also using the Launchpad Pro to sequence the Beat Squeezer here. This is a really great a little sample bank, basically, and I'll be using that to do some drums, but also I use this often to get some great piano sounds and that sort of thing. And finally as well, we've got the Yamaha CP, the old trusty CP. I'm a big fan of that and use that a lot at the moment. And again, this is all kind of plumbed in. Now, the sequencer, if we just go over here, in fact, I'm going to go and start from a fresh project, and we'll start from scratch really. So I'm going to go to this, which is an empty project down here. It's just randomly. I've got 64 projects on here. These are kind of the places that I can store my tracks, my sequences, and the kind of the slightly dimmer lit ones, the green ones here are actually empty. The ones that are coloured, they've all got information in there, but we'll just go for one of these. Now I'm going to go to the sequencer page here, and this is the first thing that you see. This is kind of our main sequencer here. Now, if I actually, let me just make sure we've got nothing coming from the Octatrack. Yeah, just mute that off. If I just hit play here, you'll see now I've got this little playhead running across the top here. And this is basically my sequence area. and we've got 32 steps for a pattern. So you can think of that as 2 bars, or actually you can use pattern settings to actually make that stretch out. So you can change the speed that your playhead moves through this. So that's pretty neat. So we've got our 32 steps here, and that makes up one pattern. And if I go to my patterns page, I've actually got 8 of those. So if you think about this in terms of bars, these 8 patterns here could equate to 16 bars worth of music. And I can join those together in the patterns page by just pressing and holding one and then pressing the other. And you'll see now, after a little time, it just queues up to stay in time. Now we're basically, we've got 32 bars worth of music there to record into. But let's just stick on a single pattern for this at the moment. Oh, by the way, a neat little trick here. Using the shift button to change pattern means that you'll immediately jump to that pattern. That's really, really useful, actually. I use that pretty much all the time. So that means there's no queuing up. But if I press it without the shift button, it's just going to wait a moment until it hits the right point, and then it'll jump into that. So everything will stay in time. But if you want to instantly jump, just press shift and just tap the pattern that you want. That's really, really useful. Okay, let's go back to the steps page. You'll see down here I've got a keyboard as well. Well, I say a keyboard. This is basically an input keyboard at the bottom, and this is set to scales. Now I'm on the green track here. Let's go to the orange track, and you'll see here I've actually just got a 4x4 square, and this is basically set out to be a drum mapping thing. So if I just go to my shift and sequencer page, here, this is how I can set up that track, the orange track. So I press the purple, you see this lights up, green and the pink, and I can just basically move between the setups here. Now, I'm going to firstly use this track to control the beat squeezer over here. Now, I've got the beat squeezer set to a specific MIDI channel, and this double row at the bottom here allow me to choose the MIDI channel. So I know that the beat squeezer is set to channel 13, so I'm going to go down here to basically step 13, if you like, out of these 16 here. And I'll go back to the sequencer page. Oh, hang on, maybe I've got my my pads the wrong way around. Oh, actually, that's not 13, is it? It's Friday evening after all, guys. That's 11, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's go to 13 instead. Now when we go back to the sequencer page, I've got some drum sounds there. And very quickly, I'm just going to quickly stick a couple of kick drums in there, add a bit of snare as well. Maybe we can live record in as well. I've got a record button here. So very quick and easy to get sequences running. So, that's simply how that works. Now I'm going to go back to my shift and sequencer page to set up the next track, which will be this purple track here. Oh, beg your pardon. Press the purple button. Now I'm going to go to channel 11, and I know that Summit Part A here, one of the synth parts, is set to channel 11. So I'll go back to my sequencer, and now I have a scale on here. This is what we saw before. So there we go, we've got a scale, we've got a whole load of kind of pre-chosen notes for us. I can change that scale again if I go to the sequence page. Here I can choose different scales. And this blue line here, but I'm going to stick with the minor here for the moment. That's what I like to play in for now. And we'll go back to the sequencer page and just hit record and then record that in. There we go, nice and simple. So that's pretty much how it works. Now I'm going to just go to my green track now, and again this is set up with a scaled part, but I'm going to go back to this page here. Now the green track here, I know that my second part, the bass part that I've got on the Summit, is set to channel 12. So green, go to channel 12, and this time I'm going to choose this option. This is the one that I normally stick with, and this gives me a chromatic keyboard. So very quick and easy to record in, so let's do that. There we go. And we've created a sequence. Great. So, that's very, very quick look at kind of using the sequencer internally on the Launchpad Pro Mark III. It's a very powerful sequencer. I mean, there's a lot of power inside here. We've got 4 tracks, you know, that's you know, it's 4 tracks to play with. I find that quite a lot, to be honest with you, with the kind of the music stuff that I'm doing. I'm using an Octatrack here as well, and I use this for a lot of beat stuff and a lot of kind of loops and you know, kind of pre-prepared kind of loop stuff in here. And pretty much all my MIDI sequencing is done really through the Launchpad Pro itself. So yeah, I mean, that's a very super quick thing, but just quickly running down what we've got our patterns here, the steps page, of course, we've just looked at that. We've got the pattern settings page. This is a really quite a powerful page. I mentioned earlier, you can change the speed resolution for each of the patterns. So if I just hit play, now this is just running at normal speed, and if I go here, when it gets to the end, I've now dropped that down to 1/4 speed. So whereas this was 2 bars of music previously, it's now 8 bars in one pattern. And if you consider that this is one pattern here, and I have 8 of those, that's potentially, gosh, my maths, again, that Friday night thing. So this, this is 8 bars, this is 8 patterns. That's 64 bars worth of music that you can put into patterns here. That's a lot of fun, a lot of stuff to play with. Anyway, let's go back to the pattern settings, go back to the normal speed. When we get to the end of this sequence, it'll just hit back. I've also got a page dedicated to control the velocity of the notes as well in the MIDI. And also a neat page here, probability. Now, probability means I can press one of the steps that I've created and I can give it a chance of playing. So if I go down here, I've got a 50% of that note actually playing. So that's you know, pretty neat thing as well. That's really good for kind of drum patterns and that sort of thing. You can get some really quite interesting, you know, kind of per chance kind of drum recording in there. And then finally, we've got a mutation here as well. And mutation is similar to probability in terms of the layout, but actually this now will allow me to add an algorithm to it to change the pitch. And if I'm in a scale, that's going to hold that scale information and make sure that it's a pitch chosen within that scale. So again, it's kind of adding a variation, kind of a probability to the sequence. Now, I've just spotted over here in the chat, we've got a great question actually. Pablo Rosso is saying, is it a polyphonic sequencer? Well, absolutely. Each of these steps can hold 8 notes. You know, and we've got 4 tracks here, so that's 4 8-note polyphonic sequences in here. So it's you know, it's a powerful device there. Okay, final page here, microsteps. We've got access to 6 microsteps, 6 sort of behind the scenes positions. So each step here actually has 6 microsteps as well, and I can kind of just add additional notes in here. So if I let's just mute out these other things. If you just listen to this first note, you can kind of hear this little broken thing. If I just hit play. It's not a great demo, but basically, you know, we can position these notes and we can sort of break them up under each step. Actually, that's really useful, again, if you combine that with pattern settings. So if you go for a slow speed resolution, you still have got increased kind of speed resolution because you've got access to your microsteps. And if you can, you know, if you spend a bit of time programming there, you know, you can basically have what we saw before, 8x8, 64 bars, but with access to kind of 8th notes in there. So it's really quite a lot of sequencing power. So that's kind of a quick rundown on the sequencer here. But one of the things that I really want to explain in this presentation really is the way that you know, you can also use this as a control surface. Now, not only is it a control surface well, based around grids, but it's a control surface that you can completely and utterly kind of create your own mappings with. And this is, for me, where it gets really very interesting. Each of the launch pads have custom pages. The Launchpad Mini has 3 custom pages available to you. Launchpad X has 4 custom pages. The Launchpad Pro has 8 custom pages. So what do I mean by a custom page? Well, here is one of my custom pages. This is a page that I've set up as a dedicated control surface for the Octatrack. And I've got various different things, which I'll go through as we progress. But I've also got another page here. And this is now 8 faders. And these are actually volume faders for the Octatrack. So this gives me basically a mixer for the Octatrack. So I've got some nice controls here. I've got faders here. This page, I've actually got a whole load of program changes set up. So I can actually quickly change change patterns, change banks, very quickly access different patterns within the Octatrack. On the Octatrack itself, you know, that you can do that, of course, but that's 3 different button presses to get to change a pattern. Whereas with this, I can just simply press. In fact, you can see here, I'm on G1 on the screen here at the bottom. If I just tap that, there we go, C1. Now, if I want to go back to G1, I've got to press bank G1. Now it's gone back to G1. So, you know, that's 3 button presses, whereas I can just tap here and it's instant. So it really can refine and increase the workflow, the speed that you work on a device like the Octatrack. What else do we have? Oh yeah, here is my second page of banks. I've got, here's G1. There we go, straight to G1. So I've got 8 different pages. I've got some mappings here as well for my beat squeezer. So not only can I control the Octatrack here, I can also take control of the beat squeezer. Now you can't really see this on the screen. Again, I've got 4 controls here, 4 pots. But in order to access the synthesizer engine or the engine inside there, I've got to go in via menus. I've got to find my way around, and it's, you know, it's fine. You can do that, but it's just not instant. Here, I've got 2 pages where I can just instantly grab hold of any of the controls in the beat squeezer that I want and start to play around with them. So let's go back to, I'm going to go back to the original sequence that I was working on before. Let's back to my projects. I'll just go to this page. I think it was this one. Yeah, that's it. Back to my sequence, and if I just hit play, yeah, there we go. You can see here I've got 4 patterns chained. And this is playing a great sound here on the summit. So if I just go over to the summit and just play around with the filter a bit. So, you know, I can still take hold of the synth here and play around with the sound nicely. So, yeah, so anyway, that pattern's playing, but let's now go to the Octatrack. This is why really I wanted to kind of do this presentation. So let's go back to the custom page here. Now, let's very quickly look at, let's see, if I go over here on my screen, this is Novation component software. Now, this software is the software we use to actually create the mapping. And if we if you look at this compared to the Launchpad that we've just seen, this is actually laid out in the same way. I've got my keyboard here, I've got my red buttons up at the top, blue buttons here as well. If I go to the track faders here, now I've got my 8 faders, and basically I can create my own mappings in this environment. So to create a mapping is very simple. Just go to New Custom Mode, Create Custom Mode, and then let's say, okay, I want a fader here. Let's say I want a fader here. Maybe I want some drum controls here. Maybe I want some program change messages here as well. And it's just super quick and easy to just click and drag. And then once you've done that, you can basically amend things like the color, the message that it sends, the controller message. So this is CC number 7. Let's change that to number 8. So let's change this to, let's see, I don't know, let's go number 10 on MIDI channel 1. Let's make that red. Let's make this drum grid kind of a violet color, nice. Program change, let's go green, let's go pink. And now I've created a mapping. So what do I do now? Well, at the minute, the components isn't connected to the Launchpad. Actually, I should have said this at the very beginning. My Launchpad here is being powered via basically a USB wall wart. I'm not connected to the computer at all on here. It's still giving me all that nice sort of control and everything without having to be connected to a computer. That's quite a big thing to think about with the Launchpad Pro. Sure, it's a great controller for Ableton. You know, it's the most powerful grid controller that we've ever made at Novation specifically for Ableton and for other software as well. It's not just limited to Ableton. But equally, this is in a completely standalone situation at the minute. So this is driving all the various synthesizers and instruments I've got around me. Oh, let's go back to the right page, sorry. Let's go back here. Yeah, so I was just saying that this is really controlling everything that's in this room. This is all hardware. There's no computer involved with this. Everything's being driven from this one little portable box here, which is really neat, really neat. So normally, if I had my Launchpad Pro connected, I would just have the little icon up at the top on the right hand side there where it's a little red cross, that would be green, and that would then just allow me to send to the Launchpad Pro. And once I've sent it to the Launchpad Pro, I can choose which template it goes into, and then, you know, we've got our own custom mapping in there. And that's a really neat way of being able to basically repurpose the Launchpad Pro for whatever purpose you want it to be. Right, let's go back now to my custom mappings for the Octatrack. So let's just go back here. While I'm doing this, I'll just ask, let's just check we've got some questions. Sequencer looks quite cool. Are you planning to add a pattern chain like in Novation circuits in future firmware updates? That's from Petra Popoff. Well, Petra, we've already got a kind of thing there. You see, I've now just gone to my patterns page again, and I've got my patterns up at the top here, but I also have scenes here. Now, this isn't random. This is the ability for me to actually choose a bank of scenes. So here, if I press this button, I can now say, okay, well, for this first scene, I want these 4 patterns to play. I want these 2 patterns to play, and we'll stick with those 2 drum parts there as well. So that's this first pattern, this first scene. If I press on this one, now I can say, okay, well, let's say I actually now want these patterns to play, and I want those 4 to play, and let's say I've got a nice drum fill here and a nice drum fill here. So now I can hit play, and it's going to play those 4 for me, and if I press here, once it's played through its thing, then basically it's going to then move into this next chain for me. So we've actually got this chaining already in here, and that's kind of similar to the way that the Launchpad, the circuit works. That's kind of that's done where you use the macro knobs with the lights underneath to kind of populate your patterns into there. You've still got a lot of power here, but actually having these things also makes it very powerful to be able to kind of perform with those pattern chains too. So let's go back. Anyway, back to the custom modes. Going to talk about the Launchpad. So let's just mute everything off here. And yeah, okay. So Octatrack, Launchpad Pro, and let's see how this is working. So on this particular mapping, I have mute switches down at the very bottom, and the mute switches allow me to just basically switch in and out tracks. So let's just start the sequencer. Okay, let's just mute all those parts out, go to the custom page here, and then okay, so we've got a beat running here. Now if you look on the Octatrack, of course, I can just use that to bring it in and out. So that's really quite useful for a start. I mean, again, you can do this on the Octatrack if you go into a certain page, but that removes a lot of functionality out of the triggers and all that sort of stuff. So that just having this available does mean that you can really kind of take control and get to grips with your Octatrack. So that's the first thing here. Now this next row here are Q switches. Now what does that mean? Well, if I press this button, you see how this is now flashing. That's sending it out of a separate output on the back of the Octatrack now. Now for me personally, I like to have a second output because then I can send that track out to my mixer. And actually if I bring the fader up on the mixer, we should hear that. Yep, now that's on its own fader on the mixer here. And I've actually got an Auto Bit Junior over here, which is now affecting that, giving it this kind of glitchy sound. So let's bring it back into the main mix. So that cue is really useful for me personally because then I can kind of separate which outputs are being used on the Octatrack and fire tracks out to various different things. Okay, then above that I've got a keyboard as well. So how does that work? Well, one thing that I should maybe mention before we do anything else are these two blue lights here. Now, if you look at the Octatrack here, the tracks, this is a track select control for the Octatrack. This means my Octatrack can be way over there, but I still can move between the different tracks. That in itself is a really, really neat and handy thing. So let's go to this track here. And now I'm going to, let's see if we've got trigs on all of that. So actually, let's go to the next track and I'll mute it. So now, this keyboard is able to play the samples on the selected track. Now if I go to that other track here, the track 3, there we go. So instantly I've got a great little keyboard there to play around with as well. Now here is, this next line, the purple line, is quite interesting. This is actually connected to the crossfader here. Now, obviously the crossfader is a really nice kind of way of working, and that's got a great feel as well. But I just kind of had a spare line here and I thought, well, it'd been quite nice to maybe put the crossfader on that as well. So let's see, if I go to scene A here, on this track, and say, okay, we'll keep that as full rate, i.e. going forward. If I go to scene B, and then move that backwards, so now it's going to play forwards, and then if I go this way, it's going to slow right down and then go backwards for me. So basically this is just essentially mimicking that crossfader. Okay, these other tracks up at the top here, these are actually just connected to all 8 tracks. Or these 8 buttons, they're connected to the 8 tracks here on the Octatrack as well. Now, let's get some music running, and I'm going to go back to my sequencer here to do that. So let's just unmute, go back to the old, okay, go back to the old Summit sound there, because I want to explore this row of lights up at the very top, and this is where things get very interesting for me, because the Octatrack is a sampler, and of course that means it's designed to record in. And what I can do is very quickly record in maybe the Summit sound. So let's go back to the sequencer. Let's just mute out the those extra drums. And here we've got the Summit playing. Now I'm going to go to track 7, this track here. And you can see that the volume's down. Actually, let's go to this next page here. The volume faders are also mapped on the second custom page that I have. And this is really neat as well, because on the Octatrack itself there is no way of having total control over the 8 faders at any one time. You've got your level control here on that, but you just have to move through each track and basically change the level when you've selected that track. By having all 8 faders here in front of you is really, really strong. So let's just bring down those 3. Let's go back to this page, unmute them. Obviously we can't hear them because I brought the volume down. So let's go to this page now, just bring those back up. There we go. And also you'll notice that they're moving smoothly as well. We've got this glide control on here as well. And that's a really, again, a neat feature. We can just do kind of nice subtle fade outs. And that's because the pads on this are velocity sensitive. They detect how hard you've pressed. If I press very firmly, we're going to get an immediate change. If I press quite lightly, we're going to get this nice kind of gradual fade. Anyway, let's go back to my custom page here. Now, I'm talking about this red line up at the top here, and this is very useful because this allows me to record on a track. Now in the Octatrack itself we have things called flex machines, and this is a flex machine, set up here is a flex machine, and this is set up to record buffer 7. So basically I've got a recording track on this particular track in the Octatrack here. Now if I've got a recording track, I need to have a recording step or trigger to tell it to record. Now if I go function and record, it takes me to my function page, and you see here I've got this flashing trigger on top of the Octatrack. Now this is, I'm on page 1 here. If I go to page 2, 3, 4, there's nothing, but on page 1 I've got this flashing trigger. Now if I just press that so it goes, well, orange at the minute, when we get there it's going to record in. So we're recording into that buffer now, so that's fine. If I press it again, it goes red. Now that's always going to be active. So if I press it again, we remove that recording trigger. Now it gets a little bit kind of head scratchy in parts, but when you get used to it, you get used to it fairly okay. But what happens now, when we get to the end of this 4th pattern here, there is now no record trigger there. So I'm going to put a record trigger in, and then press function, and press it again, and it goes yellow. Now that means there is a record trigger on there, but it's not active. And what I've got on the Launchpad here is a button, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got all 8 tracks set up here. This is track 7, record arm pad. So when I press this, it's actually going to automatically say, yes, record into this track, please. So let's do that. We've got to wait for it to pass through the 4-bar phrase because I've got this trigger on the beginning of the 1st bar. So there we go, it's in there now. So let's we go, and it's now playing, which is great. So if I just bring that in, I'll just press it again, it's going to rearm the track. Never mind, it's not the end of the world. So it's just got another 4 bars there. Now you can see here on my record settings, I'm recording in from input A. That means I'm sending that from the mixer, an auxiliary out. The mixer here is feeding input A. So let's have a listen to that now. So let's unmute it. Now I've gone back to the sequencer, and if I just mute out the summit, that track, you can still hear it. And again, if I mute out these other parts, now it sounds exactly the same, but that's what I wanted, because I wanted to sample the summit into the Octatrack. This is a really quite clever way of doing it. And again, use the keyboard. So you can do all kinds of nice things with this. Now, I mentioned before about this transition trick, and this I think is really neat. So let's just bring a couple of extra beats. Okay, now I'm going to move to track 8. Now if you notice, as I move up and down, the record page changes, and on this page I've got my source 3 set to main. Now what does that mean? Let's just stop for a second. So the main here means that basically internally the Octatrack is going to re-record in on itself. Everything that's being played through the Octatrack is going to be recorded in onto this track. So that means I can take all 7 tracks, not number 8 of course, because that's empty at the moment, that's what we're going to record into, but I can take the other 7 tracks and also any of the inputs on the Octatrack and just consolidate all of that into one track on the Octatrack. And that means, well, I'll show you. So if I just hit play, in the sequencer. Now let's record on track 8. So, that's the wrong button, it's that one. Okay, now we're recording into track 8. Everything is getting folded back into that track now. So let's just, let's just bring in track 8. Now you can hear there's a slight phasing. Actually, I really quite like that as well. It's kind of like a nice little tape flange sound, because everything is just a fraction of a second out. But if I now mute those original tracks, I've captured everything. If you look on the Octatrack, 7 tracks are muted, we're only listening to track 8. Now that's great, because now if I go to another page, let's just come out of the record page, I'm on G1 here, let's go to C1, and I know that on pattern C1, I have got record Flex Recorder track 8. So when I move there, we're going to just have exactly the same piece of music, or the same sample played back. It's a really neat thing. So let's just go to C1 now. So you can see it's queuing up. When it gets to the end here, no change in sound. We've changed to a completely different pattern, but now we've got the sound still playing. Okay, now let's go back to our first custom mapping and start to bring in some extra beats. And then if I want to kind of move out or transition out of that original part now, I can then go to my mixer page again and just gradually bring out track 8. There we go. So that's kind of a very quick and easy way of being able to do what we call the transition trick. The transition trick on the Octatrack is basically essentially kind of setting up several different patterns with the scenes. I showed you before, we've got the scene controls here where we can kind of MIDI learn these, or well, not MIDI learn, internally learn, I suppose, these scenes on the Octatrack. And you can also internally learn the level controls. So you can use this as a crossfader between the things, but that means having to set it up for each of the 8 tracks on every single pattern and part that you're working on. With this mapping, I can just hit record into that track 8, which is my main thing, and I know then that if I move to a pattern that has got the recorder 8 playing back, I've got the transition trick there, and I can just very quickly, let's just hit play again. So let's get the volume up. So I recorded in there. So I can just bring those two out, even though that's still there, and then I can just very quickly transition into a new pattern. Very nice. So let's just do that. We'll go back to G1, which is what we had before. And in the custom page, we can just quickly transition out. Although we had the same samples recorded in before when I brought them in. Anyway, there we go. But that's a really nice thing, and that's just a really kind of great way of being able to use the Launchpad Pro as a control surface for something like the Octatrack there, and yeah, and basically take a lot of control. And it really does genuinely give you a lot more options for controlling the Octatrack than you would have just from the device itself. So I'm going to finish up now. I'll have a quick look on some of the questions to see if anybody's asking anything here. Waveform was asking, can the sequencer record MIDI CC? We don't have MIDI CC recording on this sequencer. It's a note sequencer. I mean, it's a very powerful sequencer for note stuff, but yeah, I mean, it's not recording CCs there. But that said, you can obviously, use the custom mappings there. If your other devices like the Octatrack, I can kind of live record stuff into the Octatrack. I can use this as a control surface to record directly into another device as well. But yeah, any other questions? Let's have a look. No, I think we're okay on the questions. Well, in that case, I think it's time for me to sign off. Thank you very much for joining me on this. I hope you've seen something interesting in there. I have to say, I think the Launchpad Pro is a really, really strong sequencer. I do enjoy using it a lot. It's kind of up there with the SL Mark III for me. For me personally, I enjoy the SL Mark III simply because it's got the keyboard and I have the 8 tracks on there. But certainly it's a very portable kind of take anywhere sequencer with actually some really interesting things. The probability and the mutation on there, the Launchpad is a really nice option. So yeah, I'm going to sign off now, but just to let you know, we're going to be doing some more Novation live sessions as well. Next Wednesday will be another session that I'll be doing, and in that session I'm going to take a look at the Novation SL Mark III once again, but also how that is interconnected to pretty much everything in this room. And I shall be basically going through a bit of a studio rundown, but also how the SL Mark III is kind of a centerpiece for all of that. So I'll be exploring all the different MIDI settings, the way that they're all configured with all these devices here. I'll also be looking at the CV gate and kind of modulation CV controls on that as well, and how that's connected over to an SH101 here, the modular over here, and also the ARP 2600 as well. We'll probably fire that up on Wednesday and have a bit of fun with that. So if you're at a loose end on Wednesday, come and say hi, come and join us. And if you've got any questions about anything Novation, of course, feel free to ask at that session as well. But for now, I'm going to sign off, and it just remains for me to say thanks very much for joining. Thanks.